Good morning, everyone.
Hi,
Today's discussion is entitled Beyond Words, Memory, Imagination, and Conscience, Anchoring Roots and Spirituality. We are going to look at exploring how memory can catalyze both imagination and conscience in prose and poetry. And today we have three writers who are going to be talking on three different books. One is called The Promise of Memory by Michael Wieder. Good morning, Michael.
Hi, Rose.
Also, we'll be talking to Charlotte Hill O'Neill, who has written a collection of poetry called Homage. Good morning, Charlotte.
Good morning, Rose.
And we'll also be talking to Tirelo Makgeledisa, who has written a book called Voices of Jesus and Ancestors. Good morning, Tirelo.
Good morning to you, Rose, and good morning to all the panelists.
I'd like to start off with you, Michael, if I may. Your book, The Promise of Memory. Can you give us an understanding of what you meant when you spoke, when you decided to call your book The Promise of Memory?
So I think in the first instance, my approach to memory has been nurtured by one of the poem lines I recall from Wally Soroti, where way back in the 70s, I came across it where he says, "This is the way I greet you, Joburg," and he's talking about the Dompas. So you have a visual image of him bending low before the Afrikaner Constable, going into his jacket pocket to remove the Dompas. So it's such a visual moment that is very much present-based, but it also recalls what this black man had to do every time he enters his native city of Joburg, coming from Alexander Township. And so it is a very sharp distilling of the past that is ever present. And likewise with the image of the Ghanaian Sankofa bird, the bird in flight, looking back, moving forward, and seeing what's been left behind, and yet also carrying the egg of fertility or promise of what will be engendered from the past, carried in this moment of passage, and then come into fruition in the future. So Promise of Memory is a distinct reviewing of events that have influenced you, that has creolized your identity, and at the same time engenders hope, but it's also the singed part of your consciousness that is always about anger.
Can you take us through this poem entitled I Know Where Me From?
Again, it comes out of a challenge of many years ago, 1982. It's the first time I ended up in London, and I met a brother there who has a deliciously Dutch surname of Skiff, but he is full on Eugene Skiff of Zulu ancestry, very much nurtured by his own experience as a person that had been a distinct sense of being Africa in the context of KwaZulu-Natal, and then the Black consciousness of Steve Bantu Biko that he was so intimately associated with. So through a mutual friend, Lorna de Smith, I meet this brother, and he takes me to Raise Today out in Brixton. And it's a Friday evening, about 5 o'clock, and we're heading back towards the tube station, and there's a fellow, I think, of first generation British, but I think his parents came from Jamaica. And in the course of the conversation, he challenges the fact that I'm not Black. And he goes by the phenotype of my appearance, my skin color, and also the way he understands my Creole identity within the context of history. And I realized as a 24-year-old, I didn't know how to explain to another Black person how Black I am and also the fact that I had a need to by this man's challenge. And it is Eugene then that unwraps my history as one of Khoisan descent, of slave descent, and he becomes my griot that locates me on the streets of Brixton as an African. I always cherish that moment of solidarity. And then in 2016, I'm back in London in the east part of it, in a place called Leytonstone. And the vicar there is a homeboy from Elsis River, who, when he ends up in this parish of St. Margaret's, he discovers his link with the Caribbean, because there's quite a few people there from the islands of the Caribbean. And there's a family there from Antigua. And when he's in conversation with his mom, that he hears that his grandfather, Isaacs, came from Antigua, jumped ship at District 6 and never went back. And again, the brother never knew about that. And so on a Sunday morning, I'm just immersed with his aunties, just talking about and having rum cake, which is you should never consume it on an empty stomach. If the only thing that you've had that day was the Holy Communion, it's a lovely communion, but it did affect my ability to walk more easily back to the vicaries than I did when I came there. And so that experience of homecoming on so many levels just consolidated me a strong sense of who you are, that, why I have a specific geographic locale within Kamisa land here in Mzansi, that we're from everywhere, all of us, in some way or the other. We are always First Nations here in Africa, but the progeny of Africa is found in the Caribbean. It's found all over the world, and so to speak. So when I talk about I know where I'm from, it's a consciousness about one with yellow. Don't tell me who I am, I know who I am. And it's a celebration of that.
Please, can you read it for us?
Of course. If I can just quickly find the page, which I have.
Page 1.
Page 1. I know where I'm from. No look like me. Familiar of you, maybe so or maybe no, but I sure fit the shoe of the history. And they say is longer than the gallows rope, but the seed of me need that's stronger than the lion of Zion hope. I know where I'm from. I feel it in the bounce of the Guma drum, though I know a place not specifically, or me first give a name genealogically, but I know where I'm from, under dark, stormy sky or under the laughing sun. It's from here or maybe over there, but I damn sure know I am everywhere, them be black or brown or honey and beige all around. That where I'm from is where love is strong and people get along, sharing the salt of life's misery, along with the heartache and the joy that make a little I and I a mighty we. That's where I'm from, is where people ever striving to stand free, like a many river flowing into one mighty sea. I know where I'm from.
Beautiful.
Jala.
I like that you seem to remove the discussion from race and you appear to put it into a realm of spirituality. Is that true, or is that your understanding of it?
Maybe not consciously.
Yes.
And it's interesting that you picked that up. I never thought of it and then again, I think maybe also I'm a dean of a cathedral, and I see there when I do the research of histories of cathedral, at a certain point of its origin, it was neither secular nor spiritual. It was like the civic center, a town hall where people would come and just be human and be exposed to whatever the creative imagination is presenting in music and in dance and so forth. And in fact, there came a time there was no pews or seating in cathedrals. And the reason why there are seats and in churches generally is because there was too much dancing. So the Christians at that time had no sense of, I have to wait for the Goomba to dance. This place here is, the spiritual place is also where I can shake my booty.
Yes.
So that distinction is I think it's being, that secular spiritual, I think it's being contested and appropriately so. And so maybe I'm also responding of that tapping of the conscience.
Yes. And in your preface of this same edition, the promise of memory, you say, and this is the archive I access as amnesia, a necessity to dull the ache as a distant repressed pain recedes. Memory throbs into verbs, adjectives, and a syntax sometimes singed by anger. Thank you, Mike. And I'd like to ask you, Charlotte, if you can please give me the context of the poem that you're about to read now.
It's very, very important for me to honor my ancestors, especially as a Gungun priestess. Gungun is a Yoruba word for ancestor. This is something that is inherent in African spirituality, and I feel an urgent need to remind people, not only in the continent, but Africans all over the diaspora and anywhere in the world, of the importance of honoring our ancestors. We had the pleasure and the blessing of my dad living with us for 3 years here. He would come back and forth, and my mother would too, from the States to Tanzania. And after my mom passed, he said, I am lonely. And we had been urging him for years to come here to Tanzania to live with us. And he finally did 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago now. He passed away here last year, February 10th. And he's buried right outside our home here in a very African tradition. That's our ancestor garden now. And as he was making his transition, I was there with him, same way I was with my mother, and telling him it's going to be all right, and, don't be afraid, and all of that, And this poem, A Gungun Tribe and Crew, grew out of that. I wrote it shortly after he had passed away, and I'm a painter also, so I also did a mural that's part of our ancestor garden, and there's a wall there where our visitors can come and sign their names. Matter of fact, I got 40-something students out here today, and some of them will sign their names there. So, I hear what Michael was saying about the present and the past and the future being one and something that we carry with us. That's also a very, very African way of looking at time. So I love this poem, A Gungun Tribe and Crew. And like I said, Gungun is a Yoruba word for ancestors.
Can you read it for us, please, sister?
I would love to. And they were waiting at the Blue River, waiting to welcome my dad back home. Ari Gungun, ha! I see them 3,000 strong. They were waiting at that blue river with foam and crests of gold and white. I could see them shouting and guiding Dad with beautiful strong voices, urging him to come into that shimmering light that surrounded them and enveloped him, and the joy that I witnessed was palpable to my ears and soothing to my sight. There was Dad's mother, Mama Esther Honeysucker, dressed in her finest Pentecostal white robe, who Dad hadn't seen for more than 9 decades since he was a child of just 9 years old. And there was Grandfather Lee Hill, who survived and outlived all his 3 wives. He was dressed to the nines in his silk shirt and gold spun suspenders and his Panama straw fedora crown of white. And there were Dad's sisters and brothers, 8 among the 3,000, singing, "Those gates are open, our son, our brother. We got your back like none other." The jangling tambourines and the backing of those voices and the drum sound resounded like centuries before. Everybody had smiles of joy and blessings as they stomped and sang, and shouted out to welcome Dad home through the gates of those widely open doors. Dad's eyes flickered and rolled back in his head as I told him over and over, "Dad, don't be afraid." I held his hand and moaned and sang those ancient songs to him. And ancestor voices resounded as they sang, "Come on, Sterling Emmanuel, we've been waiting for you. We got your back, we got your front. Hey, this is your clan and your crew." I knew that the time is irrelevant in spiritual matters, it's true. It seems all this happened at least 1,000 years ago, but the days have added up to just 32. Dad heard it gong sing that the timing was blessed. Yes, the timing was right, and he settled right into that long sacred flight. But before he closed his eyes and took his last and final breath, a huge swirling wind from Iya blew right outside Dad's door, ushering him into new adventures in the other side of death. Dad inhaled and wonderful peace for a few moments, it seemed. Then his last inevitable exhaltation was softly and gently achieved.
Thank you so much for that. Whew, very powerful. What part in your writing, what part does imagination, memory actually play when you write your poetry?
Oh, yes. Me being a Pisces, for one thing, my imagination is just huge. I'm always thinking of things to write about or to sing or to act out, And then when I think about my history as an African whose ancestors were kidnapped so many centuries ago and taken to different parts of the world, especially America and South America. When I think of that, I am compelled. I must remember. I must share those experiences that still speak to me every day of my life. I carry all of that in my DNA, in my bones, And those are things that I will carry the rest of my life, and that's one of the legacies that I will pass on to everybody. I don't care if you're African or not. You carry the legacy of your ancestors in your DNA, and you must express it in some kind of way. That rhymed too.
YouTubers and Facebookers, I hope you're enjoying this as much as we are. Thank you for joining us. Charlotte Hill O'Neill, that's been absolutely wonderful. I'd love to actually ask you, what do you think your life would have been if you didn't come to Africa to live
Ooh.
in Tanzania? If you were actually if you remained in America, what do you think the level of spirituality would have been as opposed to now? Do you think Africa had any impact on that spirituality?
Oh, yes, 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 and yes again. Huh? I don't think that I would have felt free in my soul to express all of that. Matter of fact, I probably would have been dead because I was a member of the Black Panther Party, and so many of my comrades uh, either were killed or remain in prison all these years. And then with all the drugs that were around us, there's no telling what would have happened to me. Africa, being able to be here in the motherland, saved my life. It saved my life, you know? There's no doubt about that. And that, again, is why I am so adamant. I'm so compelled about people honoring our Africanness because so much of it is being torn away, you know? And I understand as a person whose African history was ripped off of those auction blocks and all that. I understand the importance of maintaining all of that, of who we are. Oh yeah, Africa saved me, sister. Sure did.
I love what you say in the third stanza of this poem. You were saying they were waiting at that blue river with foaming crests of gold and white. Can you explain that to me, please? Foaming crest. I love that. When I think
Yes,
of crest, when I hear the word crest, I think of a bird. So,
yes,
you know,
yes. You know, Rose, I actually saw this. I
yeah.
actually saw this. So it was like a painting, it was like a movie. So I was just writing what I had actually witnessed, you know, and those crests, you know, it was like the river was just wild. It was wild. And you know, when a river runs wild, when an ocean runs wild, it forms those crests. And because gold is such, and white is such a spiritual color to me and in my tradition and the practice of Orisha religion and lifestyle, and then tipped with that gold, I'm telling you, that just completed the whole picture in my mind. When I was writing that poem, it was like I was just holding on to the pen. You know, I write old school. It was writing itself. You know, it was that always amazes me how my poetry, how my music actually writes itself. It's just waiting on me to like just record it all. That's a blessing. It's a real blessing in my life.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, sister. I'd like to bring in Tirelo at this point. Tirelo, I'd like you to actually read this chapter, well, certainly an extract of the chapter called The Beginning of a Rebellion, Abortion or Not, from your book called Voices of Jesus and Ancestors. Tirelo, please, if you can take us through from the first page, and if you can end halfway through the next page where you say, dear employer, if you can just end that sentence there with Miss Ole. Yeah?
Yeah, I must say I'm really, really inspired. I walk around and I carry the spirits of my ancestors. It has been a very challenging change of mind because, you know, growing up, you're told that your ancestors, growing up as Christians, you're told that ancestors are demonic and all the negative things about ancestors. However, let me follow the program. Yeah, my book says, this is what I'm going to read. The law of nature take us over the most pious, prudish, and conservative of us. Fantasies, sexual thoughts and dreams are natural. whether they are invited or not. I fought them, used the Bible verses, and condemned myself for having such dirty thoughts. I had been told these were from the devil. How could I allow myself to have such thoughts? I had built up very hard walls concerning sex, but I could feel the paint peeling away, followed by the cement that was cracking, then breaking brick by brick. Prayer was not helping. The lustful sin of exchanging bodily fluids, experiencing pleasure, and fooling my fantasies brought me conflict. I knew it would be very hard to rebuild the protective walls of culture and religion. By staying celibate, I was protecting myself and felt pleasure from staying pure for Christ. I gained various variants of myself, the most difficult exercise I had ever taken. The thoughts rendered me incapable of logical thinking. Or maybe it was logical. I was just a linear thinker. I had been single for so long and I felt tired. I wanted to be touched, to feel manly breath all over my body. I just wanted to indulge in the sinful act of lovemaking. I longed to love and to be loved. The dry spell we colloquially called letswai, literally meaning salt, but used as slang for longing for sex, brought me dreams in a muscular man holding my small waist tightly, breathing heavily and making sweet, passionate throbs inside me until my whole body erupted into explosive falls. I'd wake up and be relieved. It was just a dream. Severe feelings of guilt would come quickly, an anticlimax to all the high feelings I was experiencing. A woman of God having sexual dreams, I needed to repent. The church had warned us against such dreams, telling us that it's demonic and that it meant one had a spiritual husband. I had never heard of a man having a spiritual wife. I guess men were allowed to have wet dreams. The thoughts of condemnation would pace through my head most of the day. I did not study physical science, but these theories challenged my spiritual walk in Christ. The feisty character in me dared to ask why it was wrong to have such dreams. I was harboring the truth, which was that I enjoyed the hidden moments of pleasure in my dreams. I was met with severe criticism from fellow Christians and had my faith questioned. I stopped myself from asking too many questions in church. I concluded that adults hid behind the virtue of respect to hide their ignorance or to justify illogical beliefs. When I asked why masturbation was wrong, I was told about a verse pointing out that masturbation is bad because it is a waste of sperm according to Genesis, that berated a man from pulling out. I almost mentioned that women had no sperm, therefore they were not wasting anything, but was wise enough to say nothing. Masturbation was just part of sexual immorality. What a dilemma. I privately concluded that this physical challenge had nothing to do with spiritual beings. It's natural.
Can you read just one more line, the line at the end, after that, after natural?
Oh,
Yes.
It is natural. Dear employer, please hire hot people. Secret crushes make us look forward to coming to work by Miss Ole.
I love that, Tirelo. Can you please put us, create the context in why you were having this problem with the sensuality that you were experiencing at the time?
It was based on religious beliefs that I had adopted at the time as a born-again Christian and running away from what I had been taught as a child. So there was a fight between myself, a cognitive dissonance between me as a human being and being a Christian. So there was the nature of law, the law of nature fighting religious beliefs. So I had struggled so much, but I really wanted to find a man. I'd been celibate for over 4 years and I wanted to be touched. However, I'm a Christian. I'm a spiritual being. Even in my ancestral beliefs that I was brought up with, we were not encouraged to be sexual beings. It was bad because your ancestors, how does the voice come in? How does the voice reside in you? You need to be clean for the ancestors to talk to you. Cleanliness is close to godliness, from the Bible, from ancestral beliefs, cultural belief system. But here is my body as a young lady wanting to be touched. And there's this hot guy. That is why I said the employer, hire hot people. Because there was this guy at work that I would look at and I would forget all about what I was taught. I really wanted to be held at the time. So it was a struggle. It was a very serious struggle for me as a person of spirit, a spiritual person, the person that carries the voices of our ancestors wherever she goes, and as a Christian. So it was an identity crisis, a serious identity crisis for me.
Yes, but you also went through a period of time, a lengthy period of time, where you were involved in what you call ancestral beliefs. Yes?
Yes.
Would it be correct by me calling it that? Ancestral
Yes.
beliefs. Can you take us through that whole period and what actually made you to convert to become a reborn Christian and then have this dilemma of sensuality?
Yeah, I would say I was born in the state of confusion already, considering that growing up, we used to go to the church, to the Lutheran church, but at the same time, we venerated ancestors. When we go to church, as a child, you're told that it's bad to venerate your ancestors, to respect your ancestors. At the same time, every year at home, we would slaughter a beast and we would honor those that we carry with us. So growing up in Mafikeng, it was a very small town of extremely conservative people that definitely did not honor or venerate their ancestors. They were just Christians. So it was the dilemma for me started right there. It started at home because there was no clear path as to who we really are. Now, as a child and an overthinker, I want my identity. I want to know who I really am. And what would happen is that I would start questioning the adults. And I was either met with a very hot clap, we used to call it a gaffer clap, or I was met with extreme hostility because adults were just not ready to listen to a child, nor be questioned, whether in church, whether within the traditional setup, they were just not ready to listen to a child. We didn't have voices. We were just beings that existed. So it was a very critical moment for me that I must say, I'm glad because it brought me to write this book where we should let's start listening to kids and giving them voices. Because had I been listened to, I probably would not have self-destructed so much in my young life. You know what I mean? So it was that whole conversation, that whole environment that definitely did not give me a chance to develop spiritually as myself. I mean, even now, I know for a fact that I carry the spirit of my ancestors with. And you know, like Michael Wheeler said, he said something about, I know who I am. The worst thing that can happen is to be a 24-year-old and not know who you are. And you are born again, but you know there's an emptiness within you. You cannot define who you really are. Yes, I find myself in Christ, but there's still an emptiness within me. And then, but I hear the voices, I hear the intonations of my ancestors. So who am I really? I cannot identify with who I am. So I had to go through a very, very long process until I was an adult of identifying myself. The scary part and the sad part is that South Africa is going through the same thing. There are so many of us out there who have no identity. We are caught in two worlds. I'm a Christian today. Tomorrow I honor my ancestors. You know, it's a mess. It's a mess out there. And the beautiful thing about platforms like this is that it gives us an opportunity to discuss what we really are going through. There's a number of young people who are getting sangomas. They're being trained to be healers. And the next minute they are born again. And there's just a serious confusion happening in this country. And we really need to find out who we are. The question is, do we really have to, or are we creating chaos ourselves? I still have no answer for that one.
Yes, thank you. Is it necessary really to determine that you're one thing or the other? I think, don't you think spirituality is a bit more fluid than that?
It is definitely fluid. And the peace with me came when I realized that I don't even have to compare. There's no need to compare because the blood that runs in me is the blood of my ancestors. I am because of who they were. if I'm going to be told, actually, if not, they even tell us, the question becomes when you start thinking about it, that someone comes into your life and they tell you who you are, who your deities are, who you're supposed to follow. How about you yourself know who you are? But in this instance, what's said is that the kids are born in environments like that already, of confused parents who are not telling their children that you need to be proud of who you are. Be proud of your heritage. Be proud of your identity. There's no need to apologize. We have apologized long enough. We need to carry it with pride now. The spirit of our ancestors. Yes.
Indeed. Michael, Brother Michael, is there anything you'd like to contribute to that?
Yeah,
discussion?
In terms of memory and poetry, I think what Tirelo has again sharply inducted our thoughts into is the fact that when the poet goes under the covers, literally in this case, but also excavates from memory the nature of spirituality and how Africa lived in the spirituality. And then that is contested and undermined by the ones who come with not so much a spirituality, but a regulatory way of being spiritual. And so there's a code that is now of Europe, and there's a creed, and there's an institution that regulates what is acceptable. And the poet then has the griot as poet, or the poetess griot has then the responsibility, and not even the responsibility, the intuitive reclaiming and excavating and bringing forth into consciousness the way we are and the way we choose to be. And we take now, for example, being born again. That lovely moment in Genesis, those sandy bay moments of the paradise where everybody's naked. And it seems to be an enjoyable thing, and it's a pleasuring thing. And then shame is cast on Eva, the woman, when she expresses an opinion that is challenging. It is neither right or wrong, but it's a question. And then there's the other aspect of the lonely male, who is then, when he is made out of Adam, of the clay, and it says there, and God breathed into this clay, and man became a living being, right? He became full and animated with the spirit. And the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, which is a feminine infusion in our maleness. So I think as a man, it's important for me to realize that there is also the feminine of spirituality that informs my poetry and the way I engage. And so this challenge of how we are being born again, remember Bob Dylan years ago said, if you're not being born again, you're busy dying. And so it's not a static moment, I remember when I was in the youth club, we used to sing, it was a glad day when I was born again. It wasn't a Monday. And those of us who had not had that born again moment, we had to lie, Some days I'll be born again on a Friday and the astute listener will pick it up. But already we are so compromised from an early age by those who dictate who we should be. And I thank Tirelo for knocking on that door of the spirit.
Thank you, Michael. And Sister Charlotte, you wrote a poem called The Red Cockatoo Feathers. And when Tirelo was reading this extract from a book, I kept on thinking about the red cockatoo feathers. Would you mind reading just a page from that? And can you tell me, do you see any similarity or synergy in what she's just read and this poem?
Yes. And while I'm looking for it, because I didn't know I was going to read that poem,
97, page 97.
97. I want to give a little bit of history about it, because I was one of the poets during Poetry Africa that was hosted by there in Durban, and this is in 2010. And one of the other poets, I think there were like 11 of us, was a publisher from Malawi, I think. And he challenged us to write an erotic poem, which I had never done before, except in private, you know. And I took up that challenge. And some of the things that was addressed in that poem, and I read it on the Elizabeth Snydden stage, right there at the University of Durban, KwaZulu Natal, and I had no idea that there would be like 75 students and their parents there to receive a poetry award, right? And so I was a little nervous at first. Then I said, no, there's nothing dirty about this poem, and it could actually save someone's life, because one of the focuses was having the right to end your own life, and some other things, but the main thing was the fact that self-pleasuring was nothing wrong with it. So, Tirelo, I think you were kind of delving into that also, right? And I say it could save somebody's life, because if we take the guilt out of self-pleasuring, then someone wouldn't have to go and seek out a sexual partner when they can take care of their own self, right? So I wrote about that, and I'm trying to see where. Ooh, it's one of my epic poems. This is several pages long. But
let's just do the first page.
Say what? What
Can
you say?
Just read the first page, please.
Okay, I'll read the first page. She knew that her time was fast approaching. The disease had spread too far, and the doctors gave her no hope. They sent her home to live out her last months, weeks, days, but she was happy and content, and was blessed that she could control the time and manner of her transition. She had swallowed the full bottle of pills, the tiny pink ones that would help her to sail on out of her life on a gentle note. And her last cup of honey-sweet jasmine tea had been drunk. She takes out her brightly painted, I don't have my glasses on, her brightly painted box full of her best herbal remedy and chocolate-flavored Rizla papers, and she rolls the last of the giant-sized spliffs that had been such a comfort and ease for the pains that had rocked her body for the last 6 months. And she lights up, inhales, and heads for the joy of her garden filled with veggies and flowers and stones and herbs. She sits on the stone bench slab, relishing the coldness of the hard surface against her uncovered, pantyless mound. She had stopped wearing the thick cotton panties she'd favored since she was a little girl, after attending a women's sexuality retreat more than 40 years ago, somewhere up in the mountains of upstate New York, where she'd learned so many new things about her woman's self, including the fact that her down there needs to have air sometimes and feel the sunshine and wind on a regular basis. Should I continue? And
yes, carry on.
And that's when she'd also discovered the joy of waxing her polished hardwood floors on her hands and knees, with the double glass kitchen doors thrown wide open and her thick cotton panties thrown in a corner, to feel the wild licks of wind on her unfurled, uncovered mound. And now she sat and smoked and felt the pills start to take her, and she knew her time was near, Everything was magnified. Each memory, each smell, each sound. And she isolated that tap, tap, tapping sound of the water fountain she had found at the flea market, a sound that always took her back to memories of a red-tailed cockatoo tapping at her window nearly 70 years before, and she smiled. She
Thank
pulled
you.
up.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sister Charlotte.
All
to
right.
me, and it seems like the self that we experience is mostly the self produced out of belief, and thought. So the question, is basically, what role does belief? I mean, you can see that belief has a huge role to play in terms of identity and who we see ourselves to be. Tirelo, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would really love to comment on it because it's given me sleepless nights. I have a lot of friends who are atheists, and because I cannot identify myself outside of any spirituality, I cannot. If you take God away from me, I'm as good as dead. I can take the last spliff and go. Can just throw my spliff and go, because I don't know how to identify outside my spirituality. So it's a very strong point of reference for me. And I hate speaking on behalf of other people, but growing up in the villages and townships, the first thing that I would say we experienced as children is that the minute we woke up, there was a church. There was always a church. There was a funeral, there was a church. Whenever we left, there's a church. There was always something that has to do with either Amadlozi, which is ancestors, or God. So most of us identify within the spiritual context. It's where we find our roots from our grandfathers to our mothers to those who are dead. One thing that they taught us was spirituality. So it's a pivotal role of how we identify ourselves. So yes, I agree with you that we identify more with spirituality than anything else. I still want to understand how atheists do it. It's very interesting. Where do they find their hope? Because that's where I found my hope. When I'm hopeless, when I'm stressed, and then I pray, I find peace. When I meditate, I find peace. I find it works for me. I really am interested in atheists and how they operate.
Who would like to respond to that?
I couldn't hear every word that you said, sister, but I do hear your challenge with finding your own spiritual self and finding that self through ancestral memories, and how the guilt was put on you and on so many people who are of the Christian faith, But then, in the Bible, isn't it written that we should honor our mother and father? Well, how far back should we go? I mean, our ancestors are our mothers and our fathers, So to me, it's strengthening, it's empowering to listen to those voices of the ancestors, and to follow many of the things, many of our traditions, to honor nature, which all of our ancestors honored nature, There's nothing wrong with that. That should free a person from any guilt, knowing that our ancestors come through us through love. Through love.
May I come in there?
Please do.
Yes. You just said something so imperative. And, as I was listening to you and the poetry, I was hoping that we could have more of this. When you say your ancestors come to you through love, the narrative that has been given to a lot of us was they came through pain. Now, if you go through books and literature and be around people who, especially those who have a calling to be healers, 90% of them have gone through so much trauma and pain. Now, what would happen with a person like myself? I associated ancestral calling, ancestral worship with pain. I'm over that. I'm fine now. I'm at peace with my ancestors. But 90% of the time, they will tell you they had to go through so much struggle. So there's always been a correlation or an association of pain and ancestor, where I grew up and where I come from, and even those around me. So how do we then begin to tell the story that ancestors come through to you through love, because they come from a space of love as they transcend? I was listening to your poem. It's so beautiful. I thought this changes the whole idea of how death is such a painful thing. And I hung on to my mother for 10 years after she died. And how do we make death such a beautiful thing? The way you put it, such a beautiful thing, and they will come to you through love. How do we change that narrative?
You know, I hear you, sister, because 100% of my ancestors went through the pain and suffering of slavery, but they still had times to find their joy. And that's the thing, they would find their joy through the songs that they sang, through the moaning that helped release all that pain and trauma, huh? And I always tell people, don't let them take your joy. Huh? Build on that. Build on that. I can picture my ancestors right now in those fields, or even on those ships that they tied us down in, sister. But they still were able to experience joy. Even if it was moments of joy and love, they were still able to embrace and marry each other, even though they had to jump over broomsticks to do it, so the slave master wouldn't know what they were up to. You know, the joy was always there. It was like opening up a veil, or opening up a blind or a curtain from that pain and all of that, and seeing glimpses of pleasure. And it's our duty, sister, to live the dream of our ancestors. Huh? They dreamt of joy. We got to live like that. Ooh.
Wesley, it would be wonderful to be able to see some comments from YouTubers or Facebookers on the screen, so that we can actually perhaps just give the last 5 minutes of the time to respond to some of the comments. Would that be possible?
I don't see any comments, Ro.
Oh, is it? Should we check? That's all there is. This on the chat. All right. Well, for the people who are watching, I just would like to inform you that all the publications that were read today are available from the poets and the writers themselves, and also on www.africanperspectives.co.za. You'll be able to purchase any one of the publications that were read today, from Michael Weider's The Promise of Memory, Tirelo Makgeledisa's Voices of Jesus and Ancestors, and also Charlotte Hill O'Neill's newly released collection of poetry called Homage. Can I just ask now for some closing comments? May I start with you, please, Michael?
I just wanted to, firstly, in terms of when Charlotte was reading about that glorious moment of passing, and you presented death as not something to fear, but to anticipate joyfully. And the way you presented the ancestral gathering on the other side to receive their uncles, the aunties, in the way they would have worn the fedora. So they are dressed in the familiar as you celebrated them. And I like the way the ancestors were modernized within that context, and the way we have allowed institutions and the way Tirelo has contested the divinity in terms of sexuality, I think we are nowhere near. That is only scratching at the way we have allowed the desexualization of our spirit. It is, I think the young people are now raising the flag the way Steve Bantu Biko and Mampela Rampela and them used the raise the flag of Black consciousness. There's a consciousness of, as an Anglican priest, I am comfortable when I use the word God. I talk about the divine because, and I would pray, dear divine love, because God is so ossified in the image of white masculinity. And so, again, the power of memory to see how when I, as a 20-year-old, was praying to God, God spoke English. And the deconstruction and the contesting of that memory needs to happen. And part of my poetry is engaging in a new way, which is also an ancient way, but I'm still essentially African. But I'm not the way Krotua was in the 15th, in the 16th century. I think we must often guide, if spirituality is authentic, it's a flowing river, and nor is African identity static. And so even if we say born again, the way we as 21st century Africans understand born again is not the same as the way my Oma, you must give your heart to Jesus. What is Jesus not? Jesus is not a heart surgeon. He's the lover of my soul. And again, what does it mean in the 21st century? As Africans, and I think it's those who are bearers of the spiritual DNA, that's every human being, but because of suffering and the way the trajectory of colonialism is still impacting on us, that is the way we're going to respond more sharply as Africans, or as people that are occupied in Lebanon and in Palestine. We will have a particular way of experiencing the divine. End of sermon. All God's people say amen.
Amen.
Can I have a closing comment from you, Sister Tirelo?
Oh, wow. Can we have more of this, please? Soon. Just do something, especially for the young people. This was so nice. I could sit here the whole day. So yeah, those are my words. Can we have more, please?
Amen, sister.
Amen.
Sister Charlotte.
I have to remind us, I said that we have a duty, you all, because we are the knowers. We are the dreamers and we are the sowers. We are the chosen. We are the artists and we are the seekers, and we walk the way of a new world. Yeah, that's what we're doing, y'all. Walking the way of a new world. And we got to pass that on. I give thanks to have been able to participate in this, to meet y'all. I am so inspired. And when my flesh crawls like this, it means my ancestors are right here with me. And they are. Yes, I give thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. I really appreciate your contribution. Brother Michael, it's been a long time since we've had any discussion. So this is an absolute blessing to have your contribution. Tirelo, thank you very much. Sister Charlotte, thank you so much. YouTubers, wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading your comments, and Facebookers as well. Wesley, thank you for the technical side of this, and also the University of KwaZulu-Natal for hosting the Time of the Writer 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda.